7:38. He's a busy guy. It seems like lately he's been very, very busy, and yet still carving out some time to get on the phone with us this morning. United States Senator Roy Blunt. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Hey, Tom, good morning. Good to talk to you.
We have a couple things we want to get into, and time flies whenever we're chatting about it. I want to start off with something we brought up this week, including this morning several times, and that's the wrong way Southwest plane landing at the wrong airport in Missouri. You yesterday sent out a letter to the FAA saying, what the heck is going on, right?
Well, I do. I think the very least you could expect when you get on a plane is it's going to land at the right airport. I put a letter out day before yesterday, talked to the FAA administrator yesterday. This is the second time, one in Kansas and one in Missouri in the last few weeks, that a plane landed at the wrong airport. The first one it wasn't a passenger aircraft. I've landed at that airstrip many times where they landed, and for a small private plane, as I used to fly in there as the Secretary of State with state pilots, they would say this is one of the hardest places in the world to land a plane, and particularly to land a plane that's way too big for the airstrip. And so I'm going to continue to insist that the FAA get to the bottom of this. This happens a couple of times a year, so far without disaster, but it could easily produce a very bad result, and thank God it didn't, but we need to get on top of this. And Administrator Huerta called me yesterday, stepped off the Senate floor and talked to him for quite a while about what they're doing to figure out why this happened and how we can stop this sort of thing from happening in the future.
One of the questions that you asked is, will they make the pilot call logs available to your staff? Is that going to happen?
Well, I think it will, and was there. I think there was a third Southwest employee, I've been told, that was just kind of hitching a ride, and was that distracting or not, and who else should be allowed to be in that cockpit if in fact that was true. But frankly, Administrator Huerta or I, neither one know whether that report is accurate or not at this moment, and I intend to find out.
Well, I appreciate sending off the letter, and absolutely, the first thing I thought when I heard that a Southwest Airlines flight with over 100 passengers landed at the wrong airport down near Branson, I thought, well, there's no way there can be another airport anywhere near there that has a long enough runway. Now, he did manage to stop and get that thing stopped within, I think, 500 feet of the end of the runway, but we're talking about a serious disaster had it gone past the end of that runway.
Well, that's right. This is an airport that happens to be or landing strip that happens to be essentially, as would often be the case in the Branson area, on top of a hill, and at either end of that, there's nowhere to go but off a pretty steep incline, and the runway there is about half as long as that plane is supposed to have to land. They were able to take off out of there, but had to do it in a virtually totally empty airplane. I don't even know what kind of fuel load they were able to put on, but they were able to get the plane out of there. I think significantly impacted the brake and tire system to get it stopped, but thank goodness they did get it stopped. Could have been a lot more than just landing at the wrong airport, and fortunately it wasn't. But let's do what we need to be sure that whatever causes that sort of thing to happen is addressed and doesn't happen again. In fact, Tom, they had talked to people at the tower and got clearance to land, and then people at the commercial airport are looking around trying to figure out where they landed, because they clearly did not land at the place they were expected to land just moments before.
That's amazing. Eagle News Time is 7:42. Senator Roy Blunt on the phone with us this morning. Now, let's talk about Obamacare a little bit. It's almost become one of my favorite pastimes to just look at it and just gawk. I can't believe this from the beginning of the introduction to where we are today. One of the things that you've introduced lately, a bill to increase transparency for Obamacare propaganda and other taxpayer-funded government ads. Now, Roy, I've been confused this whole time. Why something that's so gloriously wonderful, as we were told, needs to be promoted so much to a hungry public? So the idea of some transparency here makes sense to me. Can you explain more about this?
Well, I think to address the last point you made, what we've been told about this and what you is totally the opposite of what all the facts are when the cards are played. And frankly, the facts are very close to what you and I have been talking about since the middle of 2009. This is just not going to work. It's based on principles that won't work. Now to the other point, lots of taxpayer money being spent on this and other things to encourage people to sign up for this or that or whatever great program the government thinks they have. And maybe there does need to be some encouragement, but what Congressman Long, in a bill he introduced in the House and I introduced in the Senate and I are trying to do is insist that have a clear paid for by the U.S. taxpayers indication on these various advertisements that go out. I think that's the very least taxpayers should expect. And then once they know they're paying for this ad, they have much more likelihood to question why it's necessary, whether it's necessary, and why taxpayer money is being spent to buy ads to promote some government program that, frankly, probably is not going to produce a better result in many cases than if individuals and families were still making this decision for themselves, particularly on health care, in a bigger marketplace, not a smaller, more narrowly defined marketplace, but a bigger marketplace where you can find what you think works for you and your family and you can afford, as opposed to what the government thinks you and your family need and you probably can't afford.
A tag on all these commercials saying paid for with U.S. taxpayer money. I think that's marvelous. Thank you for pushing that forward. And on Obamacare, another thing that has me just laughing the whole time as I'm crying. It's like those two masks for theater. You know, it's both the tragedy and the comedy. And that's that we have anyone surprised with the White House administration that young people are not running to sign up for Obamacare. Senator Blunt, you and I knew this was going to be the case long before.
We did, and I said this again yesterday at our leadership press conference in the Senate, our media time yesterday, which was that the two faulty principles here are that you can get insurance after you're sick and that people in large numbers will not be smart enough to figure out what that means to them, and two, that young, healthy people would buy insurance at numbers beyond where they've ever been, at a price point beyond any they've ever seen. You know, and last year's market, young, healthy people paid about one fifth of what people at the top of the list of people who are getting insurance were paying. You know, people in their early 60s were paying about 5 times what people were paying in their early 20s. Beginning January 1, that number could be no more than 3 times what the least expensive to insure a person was paying. And what that means to young, healthy people is that they're looking at rates well beyond what they've ever seen before in an environment where the government also tells everybody, by the way, you can get insurance regardless of pre-existing conditions. Now, what the government so often assumes is that people aren't very smart. But in fact, most people are able to figure out what's in their own best interest. And if you look at a insurance rate higher than any you've ever seen before, and you're also told, by the way, if you ever get a really bad illness, you can sign up at some date after that for insurance, people are not going to sign. I think that the Obama administration's view was that about 40% of the people signing up need to be healthy and under 35, and that number in our state right now is about 25%, and that's where it is all over the country, which at the end of the day means insurance companies, another point, Tom, are going to go to the bailout provision, which says at the end of the year, if you've lost money, come to the government and we'll make up the money you've lost. I want to end that bailout provision as well. This is a rolling disaster for the administration, but more importantly, it's a rolling disaster for people's health care and for people that had health insurance that they thought perfectly met their needs and probably did.
It's 7:48. Senator Blunt with us. And just for a couple more minutes, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Brad Trinago?
Yeah, two other quick topics, Senator. The New York Times reporting that the NSA has implanted software in nearly 100,000 computers around the world for surveillance. What reforms, if any, are lawmakers working on for that agency right now?
Well, I think there will be reforms, and the president's going to make some announcements on that this week, later this week. I'll be interested to see what he has to say. You know, I was on the Intel committee for a long time, and frankly, in terms of what foreign governments are doing, if we have ways to find out things that are helpful to us, we should find those things out. But I personally think the NSA, in terms of the domestic records, has been holding way too much information, and more than they ever could work their way through. It's sort of the theory, if you have everything, you don't have anything, because you haven't used the kind of filter that I think NSA should have used to more clearly define what they needed, so they would have it in terms of preventing things from happening. NSA is going to see some restructuring. The president's going to make a speech on that. Let's see what he has to say at the end of the week, and then I'll decide if he's headed in the right direction or not. But I'm not opposed to us listening to what's happening in foreign governments. They're listening to us if they can, but I am opposed to collecting needless information on Americans that probably don't provide any kind of additional security and just provide lots of more government concerns about what you're got. But they're not.
Mm-hmm. And also, Senator, you guys stalled yesterday on a deal to restore long-term unemployment benefits. That's a move that affects more than 1.3 million Americans that were getting those benefits for quite a while now. Why do you not support this idea?
Well, now if you lose your job in Missouri today, you still get 6 months of insurance, unemployment paid for by the state, and depending on how high our number is, another 3 or 4, 5 months of unemployment paid for by the federal government. This idea that we'd have 2 years of unemployment insurance and that is good for the economy is an idea that I just think doesn't make sense. The big stall yesterday was whether or not this could be paid for or not by reducing some other kind of government spending, and a number of Republicans were working hard to get that done, and Harry Reid apparently is not willing to find anywhere else to cut spending to pay for this program, and so right now it's apparently not going to go forward. I'm sure at the end of the day it will not go forward without being paid for. I think the Republican House would not allow that to happen. So all of this discussion in the Senate was just to talk about anything but Obamacare. I think it was clearly let's change the topic and convince people that Republicans aren't concerned about families who've lost their job. And talk about something that's not going to happen rather than let them continue to talk about what's wrong with the path we're on with health care.
Senator, I appreciate you being with us this morning. We all do, and I know you're busy. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. And Roy, I know you travel by plane a lot. On your next trip back to Missouri, let's make sure we land at the right airport. Okay?
I hope to land at the right airport. I always hope my landings equal my takeoffs. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
But Tom, good to talk to you.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate it. 7:52, 8 away from 8 o'clock. All right.